Donald Trump publicly campaigned on lowering prescription drug prices, but in his first 24 hours as president, he swiftly acted to raise prescription drug prices by signing an executive order which revoked a previous executive order by President Biden, which lowered prescription drug prices. Promises made, promises broken. Donald Trump wants to raise your drug prices. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, Donald Trump's administration, his second administration, is off to a disastrous start when you consider the substance. Remember, he promised that he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. He failed. He promised that he would lower prescription drug prices, and he is deliberately choosing to do the opposite. As a reminder, this is what Donald Trump had to say on the campaign trail.
Inflation is destroying our country. It's destroying our families. We will target everything from car affordability to housing affordability to insurance costs to supply chain issues. We have the worst supply chain we've ever had in the history of the country, to the price of prescription drugs. Inflation.
So there you have it. On the campaign, when he was soliciting for your vote, when he was demanding that you vote for him, he was saying that he was going to cut prescription drug prices. Well, as Market Watch and others have noted, Trump rolls back effort to lower Medicare, Medicaid drug costs. Quote, the executive order halts an effort to cap the copayment for generic medications at $2 for Medicare beneficiaries. Donald Trump is working to raise prescription drug prices, not lower them. Truthout has an article about this. Trump rescinds Biden's order aimed at lowering costs of prescription drugs. Let's read about it. As part of a flurry of executive actions on his first day of a second White House term, Donald Trump on Monday rescinded an order signed by his predecessor that aimed to develop programs to lower prescription drug prices in the United States, where residents pay far more for medications than people in peer countries. News of Trump's rollback of Executive Order 14087, titled Lowering Prescription Drug Costs for Americans, was buried amid dozens of other rescissions the president ordered shortly following his inauguration. The decision to scrap Executive Order 14087 brings a halt to several pilot programs undertaken by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, including an experiment that involved offering generic medications for a $2 copay to Medicare Part D recipients. Quote, this act is a good indication of how Trump will approach lower drug prices. Social Security Works, a progressive advocacy group, wrote in response to Trump's rescission of President Biden's executive order. Larry Levitt, executive vice president for health policy at KFF, added that, quote, the big question, which Trump hasn't addressed yet, is what he'll do with government negotiation of drug prices under the Inflation Reduction Act. We'll get into that in a second. Remember that. Just days before Trump took office, the Biden administration announced a fresh slate of 15 medications set to be subject to direct price negotiations between the federal government and pharmaceutical companies, many of which have sued over the negotiation program, thus far unsuccessfully. Reuters reported last week that the powerful pharmaceutical lobby has been pushing Trump's team to back changes to the Inflation Reduction Act that would weaken the price negotiation provisions. Quote, Donald Trump is already following through on his dangerous plans to jack up the cost of drugs to appease his billionaire backers after the Biden-Harris administration took on Big Pharma and won. Alex Floyd, Rapid Response Director for the Democratic National Committee, said in a statement, quote, Trump again is proving that he lied to the American people and doesn't care about lowering costs, only what's best for him and his ultra-rich friends. Responding more broadly to Trump's day one wave of unilateral attacks, which included attacks on immigrants and climate, Working Families Party National Director Maurice Mitchell said Tuesday, quote, Trump's flood of executive orders is just a cheap spectacle meant to distract us while his administration moves to gut our health care and SNAP benefits. Quote, immigrant families aren't the reason we can't afford eggs or prescription drugs. Billionaire CEOs are, Mitchell added. So, again, this is pretty blatant, a pretty egregious violation of a major commitment Donald Trump made. Now, the article referenced the Inflation Reduction Act and 15 additional drugs. So this is from the archive of President Biden's White House on Twitter. Big news, 15 more drugs have been selected for Medicare price negotiations under President Biden. Our administration completed the first round of negotiations last year and delivered dramatic savings, slashing the price of some most commonly used drugs in Medicare by about 40 to 80%. And so some of the 15 drugs which were announced, which a big one to me that stood out, was Ozempic and Wegovy for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, obesity, overweight, and cardiovascular disease. Others that I don't recognize, Zyfelzan and others, I mean, they have the reasons and what they treat in the italics below. For type 2 diabetes, that's number 11, Tradjenta. Ibrance, number 5 for breast cancer. Again, the big one that stood out to me, which is a household name, is Ozempic and Wegovy. So I want to make it very clear here. Let's really contextualize this. Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016, did campaign on lowering prescription drug prices. And to be fair, that's a promise that's been made since the Clinton administration. President Clinton ran on lowering prescription drug prices by allowing Medicare to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. That didn't happen under President Clinton. President Obama campaigned on something similar. That didn't happen under President Obama. Donald Trump campaigned on it as well. He made, in his first term, a commitment. We're going to lower prescription drug prices by allowing Medicare to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies. He said famously, he's like, it's ridiculous. I can't believe we don't allow Medicare to negotiate. Other countries do it. And it was actually pretty smart that he said that. Of course, it was echoed by Democrats at the time as well, Bernie Sanders included. And then he dropped that promise like a hot potato in term 1. President Biden comes into office in January 2021. He gets it done. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was a partisan piece of legislation because Republicans didn't vote for it, in that sweeping bill was a provision which allowed Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. So I want to be very, very clear. This is a fact. This is not a matter of opinion. If you believe otherwise, you are either wrong, a liar, or an idiot. One of the three. It's because of Biden and Democrats that Medicare can negotiate prescription drug prices, which will indeed lower the cost of prescription drugs. That is a win for Biden and the Democrats, not Republicans. Democrats get 100% of the credit. Republicans get 0. But because these price changes go into effect in 2025, and then is staggered each year, Donald Trump is going to try to take the credit as he simultaneously works to raise prescription drug prices. He's done this famously. Remember what he did with Obamacare. He attacked Obamacare relentlessly, both legislatively and at the Supreme Court, trying to get it repealed. He even tried to do it during the COVID pandemic. He tried to strip healthcare away from millions of Americans by trying to get the Supreme Court to rescind it. But when it's convenient for Donald Trump, he'll say he saved Medicare. Man, I saved Medicare. Medicare is the Obamacare. I saved Obamacare. Obamacare is alive because of me. Even as he attacked Obamacare in the legislature and the Supreme Court. Apologies if I said Medicare. I meant Obamacare. But what I mean is his position, his rhetorical position, his public stance just depends. It changes minute by minute depending on what is convenient. But to be very clear, it's because of Democrats and President Biden that the Inflation Reduction Act permitted Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. So in a sane world with a sane electorate, the Democrats would get all the credit and Trump would get none. But Trump is going to work overtime to try to get the credit, to try to milk this for what it's worth, even as he takes concrete steps to raise prescription drug prices, which is what he's done with this executive order. As Adam Schiff points out, Donald Trump rescinded President Biden's action to lower prescription drug costs for Americans on Medicare and Medicaid. There's no other way to spin it. That means more money out of pocket for seniors and families. Big pharma first, ordinary people laugh. That is Senator Adam Schiff. Brian Tyler Cohen, progressive commentator and friend of the show, also echoed that. Trump just rescinded an executive order issued by President Biden to lower prescription drug costs for people in Medicare and Medicaid. Fact Post echoes this as well. Tristan Snell, a progressive lawyer, talked about this. Breaking Trump raises prescription drug costs by as much as 4,200%. He just reversed all the cost caps Biden negotiated for anyone on Medicare and Medicaid, over 120 million families. He's pro-big pharma, pro-big insurance. He doesn't care about you. It's all lies. So, folks, this is the point. Trump will say something, do another. He does this apparently like it's a very bamboozling Kansas City shuffle for a lot of people. But let's be clear. Donald Trump campaigned on lowering prescription drug costs. He failed in term 1. Biden got it done in his first term, thus proving, once again, on an apples-to-apples comparison, Biden understood government and was a better executive and legislator than Donald Trump. Donald Trump campaigned in this election cycle on lowering prescription drug prices, and he won, but one of his first steps is to actually raise prescription drug prices by rescinding one of President Biden's executive orders, presumably because he just wants to stick it to Biden and the Democrats. So this is something worth noting, and we have to relentlessly point this out because, of course, facts don't speak for themselves. Donald Trump once again broke a major campaign promise, and he is working to increase costs for the American people, despite promising you something else. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.